Welcome back, everybody. We are here for week number 10 of OWL Season 3. We are continuing on to the third week of all online matches. No homesteads for the rest of the season. Um, as we heard about a week ago, they made the decision to permanently cancel the homesteads for the rest of the season. So it's sad, sad day. I know a lot of the community like to get together. You get to meet some people that you might be friends with online that you met in the Overwatch community, and meetups like that won't happen now. So also the players won't get to experience the fans um, right there. So it's unfortunate, but Overwatch League, they're doing what they can to keep people safe, and it makes sense. So still online. Um, Hopefully there's even less kinks this time. I thought that there were less delays and it ran a little smoother last week. I don't know if you guys agreed. I watched a good amount of the matches. But we do have a new, fresh slate of games going on this weekend, so super excited. We get one main team that is back in action. So the Chinese teams, we got Hanzhou Spark playing against the Chengdu Hunters starting it out. So I'm going to go with the Spark here. I think that this is a close match. If this match is a 3-0, it's going to be a 3-0 for Chengdu. But I think it's back and forth. Chengdu has essentially choked two of their matches very hard. That they just had them on lockdown. Particularly the one against Guangzhou last week is just like, how did you let that slip through your fingers? But they did 3-0 the Dragons. So Wrecking Ball's back. Meng's power level will rise enormously from that just by itself. But in the end, I think Hanzhou will just scrape it out. They've been solid in their map fives. They did lose one five mapper, but in the history of their franchise, they've done well in these. Chengdu has not this season, so I think Hanzhou wins a little bit in a brawly composition. Especially since we have no Reaper for this week, so I like their DPS flexibility a bit more. I really like the tank line. Goushwei has continued to build off of a super strong season 2. He's looked very strong this season as well. So, in a close matchup, should be a super fun one, as most of these Chinese ones are. I'm going to take the Spark in a map 5. Then we go on to Vancouver Titans. They are back into this Chinese almost division, I guess you could say, this little section, and they are going to be facing up against the Charge. So should be a super fun one. These teams had their first meeting in season 1 was an absolute phenomenal game. Went all the way to a map 5. If you have not seen that match, I would highly recommend going back and watching it. You had some huge plays. I remember there was just an epic Janu bomb on Elios to kind of flip one of the points for the Titans. So super entertaining. I think this one will be entertaining as well. I do like Vancouver though. Guangzhou, they still have these inconsistencies. They still have these misplays. I think of all of the teams, they have of the Chinese teams, they have some of the highest highs where they just kind of steamroll forward, and they have some of the lowest lows where they just waste ultimates, tank multiple fights, or even like maps because of weird picks or just weird decisions by multiple members of the team. So I think Vancouver's a team that picks apart things like this pretty damn well. They did a good job of it last year. Got off to, of course, a 2-0 start this year. So I'm going to take the Titans, capitalizing on some mistakes, being a little bit of a stronger team overall, even though both of these teams are extremely talented. Fissure looked like he was super comfortable already with the Titans, having a huge performance, particularly against the Gladiators. So I envision that happening once again, and I like Vancouver to win it 3-1. Then we have a really good matchup, Philadelphia Fusion versus Paris Eternal. We had a lot of these grudge matches last week, whereas, okay, can this team get revenge? We saw Paris get revenge on Houston. We saw Dallas get revenge on Valiant. We saw a couple of teams fail to get revenge. But we're looking at Philadelphia trying to avenge their only loss of the season against Paris. So, this is an interesting one. Paris did avenge their loss against Houston last week. They looked pretty strong. Very shaky in the early map, but then after that they really kind of picked it up and looked, like I said, just a lot more smooth, a lot cleaner. and they just kind of took Houston apart at that point. I'm gonna go with Philly to get their win. You guys know my theory. Teams I don't usually pick teams if they're a similar skill level. I don't like picking the same team to win multiple matches in a row. So I think these two teams are pretty similar skill. I would say Philly's a little bit better. Paris maybe a little bit better at the meta with some compositions, but Philly looks super strong last week. When you have Carpe, you know he's going to turn in strong performances. And Hisu had a tremendous albeit it was on the Reaper, not too much mechanical skill involved there, but he worked really well within the team, and that's almost more important to me than mechanical skill because all of these players, all these DPS players are super skilled in terms of their mechanics. So I don't worry about that. I worry about him acclimating to the team, and he did a very good job of that in his first week. So that makes Philly even more scary. I think that Hisu is a bit more of a better player, a better talent, a bit more well-rounded as well than Ivy. So I think that's an upgrade. They have an extremely scary DPS duo. I don't think we see Chipsa this week. If we would have seen him, it would have been the last couple of weeks. But I'm gonna say it's close. I think Paris takes some of the 2 CP type and the more set playstyle ones, and then in the more brawly or controls, I like fusion. So they go to a map 5 onto that control, and Philly gets their revenge on Paris. Another grudge match. We got Houston versus Boston Uprising as oh shoot, which caster was it? One of the analysts or casters called it El Clasico, and it certainly was. We had a map 7 between these two teams a couple weeks ago. These are, of course, two of the bottom teams in the league, with Boston sitting at a 1-6, Houston sitting at a 2-6. So they both need victories here. I'm going with Houston. I think it was a little bit of a fluke that Boston beat them last time. Seemed like Houston was a better team, and that was in a meta much worse for the Outlaws. I think the Outlaws also have kind of gotten it together a little bit. They had a pretty competitive showing against Paris last week, and Paris, is a strong team. Since they have a couple of wins now, I think they're starting to gel a little bit. Jexe has been one of the best players in the league. He's surprised me tremendously after I thought being extremely average last season on the Dynasty when he played, but he's had a tremendous performance. Meko is continuing to pick up steam, so I like Houston here a lot as long as they don't play Blase. Blase doesn't seem like he's meshed with the team at all. He's had some pretty abysmal series and maps, so I would really like to see a combination of like Dante and Linkser, Hydration and Dante, something like that. Obviously, we'll know once the meta hits, but I do like them. Boston now with a new flex tank coming in with Brucen. He played last week, but still pretty new to playing. So I think that'll slow Boston down a little bit. And even though Houston will probably have a stinker of a map because it's the Outlaws, I do think that they'll eventually get it done 3-1. And we have an interesting one here. We got the struggling Washington Justice. They're also down to 2-6. It's starting to look a bit like last year, where they have Corey and a couple of other skilled players, but they just don't have a team. They have just failed to coalesce. It's just not happening. I feel like Roar hasn't really connected with the DPS line at all. Their main tank and off tank synergy. Between Elevote and Roar has just seemed off. I feel like Aim God has died a lot early on and just been out of position. So I would say I like Washington because of the DPS, but Dallas's strength is also their DPS. So we got a 2-6 team versus a 1-3 team. I'm gonna go with Dallas here. My gut tells me Washington, but my brain is telling me Dallas. They finally got their first win. They're starting to pick up a little bit of momentum. Losing Reaper in the pool is not a big blow for them, so I like them to really bounce back from that 0-3 start. And both these teams, you got to start winning. If you want to distance yourself from that 17 to 20 pack, you got to keep winning. And Dallas, they got an opportunity to go 2 in a row. If they win this, all of a sudden you're 2-3. You're just about 500, and you're kind of in the mix, in the middle. So I like them to get it done. I think they're a little bit of a more well-rounded team. I think that they'll probably have a little bit of a better grasp on the meta because Washington has seemed very ill-equipped to deal with these week-to-week meta changes. So I like Dallas here. I still think it's pretty close. We get a lot of close maps, but I'll say 3-1 for the Fuel. Moving on, we got the Chengdu Hunters taking on Vancouver Titans. So these teams have had a couple of super fun matches. They also went to a map 5, the fabled season 2 match. Again, another one. If you have not seen it, go see it. Where Ameng just flexed all over Bumper on the Reinhardt. Even though he's pretty much a ball one trick. He's always been portrayed as a ball one trick. That's his main. He barely plays any Winston. He plays some Orisa. He barely plays the Rhine, and he just had a tremendous performance. Jinmu had some great plays, and it was super close. Vancouver did eventually pull it out, but one of the most fun matches of the season for sure. Hopefully we get another really fun one here. I'm going to say Vancouver 3-1. I think Chengdu could steal the control from them, and I think they'll probably make one of the other ones close, maybe Payload. I know that Escort has generally been a pretty good map for the Hunters, particularly against the Titans. Yeah, I think Hunters keep it interesting. They keep it pretty close, but I don't see them having quite enough firepower to take down Vancouver, especially since this is a little bit of an upgraded Vancouver team, I would say, from last year. But who knows? Maybe Vancouver will struggle a little bit. They haven't played in a while. Playing against this very, it's just a different style that the Chinese teams play with. The metas are a little bit different. The fights are they're not as usually calculated as a lot of the NA fights. They're more chaotic. You have clutch plays coming out from certain players. You have crazy ultimates at weird times, and it's super entertaining. So maybe it'll throw off Vancouver a little bit, or maybe they'll play super clean and they'll just smoke the teams this week in the Charge and the Hunters. I'm gonna say it's a pretty close one though. I think the Hunters will give them some problems. They've done it before. I don't see any reason why they don't do it again. But in the end, Vancouver, superior team, they get the 3-1 victory. Then, very interesting one. We got Shanghai Dragons sitting at 3-1. A lot of people have them just rising and rising in the power rankings up to as high as I've seen 4. Against the Charge, who again, high highs, low lows, little inconsistent, sitting at 2-2 right now. These teams matched up earlier. Shanghai won it, going away 3-0. That was the first match, of course, for these teams this season. I think Guangzhou makes it really close. I'm not going to quite go with an upset here. I think Shanghai, I've just seen little improvements from them. Watching the VODs, little improvements here and there. I really am surprised with this tank line. I gotta give Stan 1 and Void a lot of credit. They've played super well when they've been in there. We did also see Fearless for a map or two. Of course, he's a year one Shanghai player who couldn't play at all last season, but he was back in there. But this Shanghai team, we already know about the DPS lines. Lip hasn't impressed me that much, but he has shown flashes. And then, of course, when you have Fleta, anything is possible. You got Izayaki, who's got a clutch factor that very few support players in the league have, where he can just murder. He can just flip an entire fight for you. We saw it when he was on the Valiant last season in a couple of spots on the Zen, and on the Ana he's shown some really clutch tendencies as well. So I'm going to take Shanghai. Maybe it's just hopeful, but I think it's super competitive, and we go to a 5th map with the Dragons pulling it out and going to a 4-1 in the end. Next, we got Houston Outlaws taking on Toronto Defiant. So, Defiant are on a little bit of a win streak. They've won 2 in a row. Their record's up to 3-4. This should be a pretty, good matchup. Houston did beat Toronto last time they went against each other, so I'm going to go with Toronto here. I had Toronto has, right about a 10-11 team in the league at the start, and I think that they're starting to get there. They had some real issues in the beginning, but I think they're really starting to figure it out. They're starting to play around Beast a little bit more. Kareev and Calyx getting a little more familiar, with the DPS line. I think Nevix has been really solid. And, I think for Toronto, it just kind of comes down to the DPS that week. You're going to have consistency from Surefour. You're going to have some big plays from Logix when he's in for a map or two. But then when we need it from agilities. He's been a little bit more consistent this season. I think if they can keep him off the May, if they can get him on some other heroes for maps, he's gonna play really well. And so I'm gonna take Toronto here, 3-1. But it could go either way. Houston kind of ran away with it last time. But with the bans, I'm leaning towards Toronto here. I think that Surefour will really play well. Beast has been improving steadily, and I think that that is the difference in the end. Then we close out with two great matchups on Sunday. Philadelphia Fusion versus Atlanta Reign. So, got Atlanta, they've only lost one match, and we got Philadelphia, only lost one match. So, two upper tier teams for sure. I'm going to go with Atlanta here. Atlanta has just seemed like a very strong team when they have a lot of time to prepare. This is their only match of the week. Philly is going to be coming off. I think will be a very hard-fought match the day previous. I think that Atlanta has at least as good a talent, if not a little bit better, as Philly. I think that they got the DPS to match up. When you talk about Erster, so versatile, so good on his heroes. I think that they will just kind of edge it out. I've really liked the way that that Gator's been playing as well, and that support line is super familiar with the team. It's close. It's a close one. I mean, this one's a coin toss for me. You think probably Philly has a slight edge in DPS. I would say Atlanta's got an edge in tank. And maybe Philly then again has a slight advantage in the support. I've been really, really, more so than anyone on Philly this season, I've been so impressed with Alarm and Funny Astro. They've just done such a good job of keeping their tanks healthy and enabling them to create this much space. And of course, when that happens, then Carpe goes nuts. So, chain of events, it's been really great, but I think that Atlanta's going to come in with some really unique strategies. They've shown this in matches before. They come in with some strategies that just throw off the opponents. I think that could happen. Will force some mistakes in the tank line, and in the end, in a hard-fought match, I'll say Atlanta wins. I'm going to give them a 3-1, with pretty much every map being close. And then we go on to the last match. It is a rematch. San Francisco Shock, LA Gladiators. So, Gladiators took down Shock last time they played. These are two teams sitting at 2-2 in the same division. So, it's a super important matchup. Shock have looked a bit shaky, but they did come back and get revenge on the Valiant last week for their second win on the season. Gladiators have been looking, pretty darn solid. They did lose that matchup to Dynasty, but then, they took down Shock. So, and they also cleaned out the fuel pretty easily in a 3-0. I'm going to go against my theory. I think the Gladiators get two in a row against the Shock. I think that they pull it out in a map 5. I just really, really like the team play of the Gladiators right now. I think that they're really starting to feel each other as a group. You've got the support line. They're just so rock solid. The DPS, which has mostly been Mirror and Bird Ring, has been super solid with an occasional Jaru sighting. And that tank line, man, that tank line just keeps impressing me. OGE and Space, they're so good. Space is the best Western off tank. You cannot change my mind. Been saying it since last season, maybe even end of season 1. Where he goes, success just follows. And then OGE, he's been a lot more consistent. Inconsistencies throughout his career, but really high highs. And I think that with such a good veteran support line and with such a good veteran flex tank to pair with him, I just don't think the inconsistencies are going to be there as much as they were when he was in Dallas. So, that being said, I'm going to take Gladiators to win this. Shock, I think too many rotations. I think they're still trying to, kind of figure it out. They haven't been super quick to adjust to meta changes as well. So I like Gladiators there because they have more consistency. They've been playing cleaner, better Overwatch over the last few weeks, and I think that'll continue to happen, and that will give them the edge over a slightly more talented team. So got Gladiators taking it in a map 5. So those are the matchups for this weekend. Man, we have a lot of good ones. great week of Overwatch coming up. I hope you guys are excited. I know viewership has been down the last couple of weeks, as to be expected. Production value is going to be a lot lower. Some people will probably just opt more for VODs, but I would advise everyone to watch some games because we should have a bunch of competitive ones. Good luck to your teams if they are playing. Let me know what you think about the predictions in the comments. If you think there are any big upsets brewing, I'm curious to know. So, with that, I hope you have yourselves a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, stay at home as much as you can, and I will see you in the next one.